I met Claire in college 15 years ago. She was the kind of girl who seemed to walk in her own orbit, quiet, self-assured, the kind of calm that made noise feel unnecessary. I wasn't her type back then, or maybe I wasn't anyone's. I was just the guy fixing cars behind the dorms trying to afford textbooks. She came from money. I came from work. We crossed paths at a friend's birthday dinner. She laughed at my jokes more than I expected. I still remember the way she tucked her hair behind her ear and said, "You're different, Ethan." That night I drove her home in my old truck, and she kissed me on the cheek before walking away. It was simple, honest. The kind of beginning you never think will turn into a lifetime. Years passed. We built everything together, careers, a house, even small rituals like Saturday pancakes and evening walks. She was a marketing manager. I ran a small construction company. We never needed luxury, just peace, or so I thought. Somewhere around our 10th year, things started to shift. She got promoted, began traveling for work. Her messages grew shorter, her tone colder. I told myself she was just busy. That's what husbands do. They explain away the distance, hoping it's temporary. But distance isn't quiet. It echoes. The first time I truly felt it, she came home from a 3-day conference. I reached for her suitcase to help unpack, and she pulled it away like I'd crossed a line. "I'll do it," she said, eyes a little too sharp for the moment. That night, she slept facing the wall. By our 15th anniversary, the silence between us was louder than any argument could have been. I planned a dinner. Nothing fancy, just our favorite Italian place downtown. When she walked in, she looked stunning. But her eyes had that faraway shine, like she was sitting there only because it was expected. Halfway through the meal, I raised a glass and said, 15 years, Claire. Not bad for 2 college kids who barely knew what love meant. She smiled politely. Yeah, a long time. Then, like she was commenting on the weather, she added, "You know, I've been thinking about that night. Our first date. It feels like such a young mistake now." I blinked. A mistake? She shrugged. We were kids. We didn't know what we wanted. Maybe we just grew into the wrong versions of ourselves. The waiter arrived with dessert, but I couldn't taste a thing. The word mistake hung in the air like a bad smell. She went on about how people change, how love evolves, how she needed space to rediscover herself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I just nodded and said, "If that's how you feel, I won't stand in your way." We drove home in silence. I remember her scrolling through her phone, smiling faintly at something. I didn't ask what. I already knew the look. Someone else was in her orbit now. When we got home, she went straight to the guest room. I sat in the kitchen for hours, just staring at the empty wine glass she left behind. It wasn't the drink that hurt, it was the indifference. At 2 a.m., I walked into the living room and saw her laptop open on the couch. An email draft glowed on the screen. The subject line read, "Moving forward." It was addressed to someone named Daniel. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. The way she'd said "young mistake" told me everything already. By morning, I packed a small duffel bag. My clothes, my watch, my father's photo. Before I left, I logged into our joint accounts and froze them all. We had built that life together, every dollar, every payment, every shared plan. If she wanted to rediscover herself, she could start with independence. When she woke up, I was gone. No note, no text, no fight, just absence. A week later, she showed up at my office. Hair tied up, face tight with irritation instead of regret. "Ethan," she said sharply, "the bank says I can't access anything. What the hell are you doing?" I looked at her the way you look at a stranger who vaguely reminds you of someone you used to love. "I'm making sure the man who paid for every young mistake gets to decide how it ends." She glared at me, but I saw the flicker of something behind it. Panic, maybe. Or realization. That was the first time I saw her walls crack. But I wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. She said, "You can't just freeze me out of everything." "It's cruel," I replied. Cruel was calling 15 years of loyalty a mistake. For the first time in a long time. She had nothing to say. For a week after that confrontation, I didn't hear from her. No calls, no texts, no messages left on my voicemail. Just silence. I figured she'd run straight to her lawyer or maybe Daniel, the name that had burned itself into my mind like a scar. But one night around 10, I got an email. The subject line read, "You didn't have to do this." The body was short. "You could have just asked for space." You didn't need to embarrass me like this. I'll fix it on my own. Claire, there was no apology, no regret, not even a hint of sadness. Just pride wrapped in self-pity. I closed the laptop and didn't reply. I'd spent years being the man who explained everything. This time I let silence explain me. A few days later, her sister Megan called. We'd always been close. She was blunt, unfiltered, and loyal to truth more than blood. Ethan, she said, Claire's a mess. She's saying you cut her off like some vindictive ex. Maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe I just stopped funding her comfort while she figured out who she really wants. Megan sighed. You know, she told Mom that night at dinner you were predictable. Too steady. Too loyal. She said she missed excitement. Then she found it, I replied. She should enjoy it. There was a pause. You really loved her, didn't you? I did, I said. But love isn't supposed to feel like trying to convince someone you matter. After that, I stopped talking about her altogether. I threw myself into work. The guys at the site noticed I was quieter, but they didn't ask. Men understand that kind of silence without words. About a month later, I ran into one of her colleagues downtown. He looked uncomfortable the second he saw me. Hey, Ethan. Haven't seen Claire around lately. She took some personal leave, I think, I nodded. Hope she's doing okay. He hesitated. She, left Daniel's team, too. Something about boundaries. I just smiled faintly. Boundaries. She finally found some. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, it was something closer to peace. Like watching a storm pass that you'd already built the shelter for. A few nights later, I got another email from her. This one was longer. Ethan, I didn't mean it the way it sounded that night. You weren't a mistake. I was just lost. I thought I needed more. But I think I was chasing a version of myself that didn't exist anymore. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry, for a long time I just stared at those words. They were everything I'd once begged to hear, but now they felt like an echo in a house I no longer lived in. I wrote back only one line. Sometimes, realizing too late is part of growing up. I didn't send it. I just saved it as a draft and closed my laptop again. Weeks passed. Life, as it always does, began to find its rhythm. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the river. I learned to cook properly again, not just reheat leftovers. I started running in the mornings. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd put on pause waiting for her to look my way again. One evening, I was locking up the office when a delivery guy handed me a brown envelope. No return address. Inside was a check, a transfer of half the savings we once shared, and a note. You earned every cent of this. I don't want to owe you anything. I folded the note and set it on my desk. It didn't sting. It didn't heal. It just ended. And sometimes that's the kindest thing an ending can do. Months later, I ran into her again. A coffee shop downtown. She looked different, smaller somehow. Not in a physical way, but like someone who'd finally been introduced to her own reflection. She smiled politely, the way strangers do. Hi, Ethan, she said softly. Hey, Claire. A long pause sat between us. Finally, she said, you were right. Some mistakes aren't about youth. They're about not valuing what's real. I nodded. Maybe, but maybe we had to lose it to understand it. She gave a small, tired smile. Do you hate me? No, I said honestly. I just don't remember the version of me that still needed you. Her eyes glistened for a moment. Take care of yourself. I've been doing that lately, I replied. She nodded, looked down, and left. As I watched her walk away, I realized something. Love doesn't always die in betrayal, it dies in indifference. The kind that grows so quietly you only hear it once the house is empty. That night, I stood on my balcony, the city lights stretching into the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel bitterness. Just clarity. She had called our beginning a young mistake. Maybe she was half right. It started young, but it ended with understanding. And maybe that's all a man really needs in the end. Not revenge. Not validation. Just the peace of knowing he didn't lose her. She lost the man who would have given her everything,